Welcome back to Dr. Leo Six's channel. The aim of this channel is to learn multiple languages simultaneously, using a variety of methods. Today, by analyzing international affairs and exploring the US-Iran war from the perspective of the Spain and Latin America world, we will learn two Spanish words: Impacto Sistémico, systemic impact; Efecto Dominó, domino effect.
A missile hits a commercial oil tanker in the Strait of Hormuz, and 3 days later, the ruling political coalition in Madrid nearly collapses.
Yeah, it sounds like the setup to a political thriller, but, I mean, it's happening right now.
It really is. Welcome to today's deep dive. If you've been following the news, you already know the escalating US-Iran war is completely dominating the headlines.
Right, everywhere you look.
Exactly. You've seen the naval standoffs, the multi-nation base attacks, the geopolitical brinkmanship. But today, we're actually turning that standard monitor off. We aren't looking at this crisis from Washington, and we aren't looking at it from Tehran.
No, we're looking at this from Madrid, from Bogota, and Mexico City. We're shifting the coordinates entirely to see how a regional conflict in the Middle East basically rewires the economy and the politics of the Spanish-speaking world.
Yeah, and to do that, we've got this massive stack of media coverage from major Spanish-language outlets. We're talking, El País, RTVE, France 24 Español.
Heavy hitters.
Right. And our mission today is twofold, and it's really tailored specifically for you as a dual learning experience. So first, we are mapping the very real systemic, economic, and political ripple effects hitting Spain and Latin America right now.
And second, which I think is so cool, we are decoding the exact Spanish terminology the media uses to describe those effects.
Yeah, it's about mastering the geopolitics of this war while, picking up high-level Spanish vocabulary at the same time. So, okay, let's unpack this. Because the vocabulary a culture uses to describe a crisis, it honestly tells you everything about how that crisis is actually hitting them at home.
Oh, absolutely. When you read foreign policy news in another language, you quickly realize you aren't just getting a translated version of the facts.
You're getting a totally different perspective.
Exactly. You're getting a completely different framing.
Yeah.
And before we get into all the economic mechanics, we really have to look at how the Hispanic media defines the fundamental nature of this war. In our sources, there is this foundational noun that anchors almost every major editorial.
Right. The word is Sacudida.
Sacudida. Yeah.
Which, it translates directly to a severe shock or like an upheaval, literally a violent shaking.
A violent shaking, yeah.
Yeah.
And the choice of that specific word is so revealing. They aren't framing this as, a distant conflict happening on some map thousands of miles away. By calling it a sacuda, they're categorizing it as a seismic tremor that they physically feel right beneath their own feet.
And that feeling of a continuous tremor, it really dictates how they describe the timeline of the violence, doesn't it?
It does. You see the media repeatedly characterizing the conflict as a guerra de desgaste, which is a war of attrition.
Right.
Or frequently they call it a guerra sin salida, a war with no exit.
A war with no exit.
Yeah.
Because we're looking at a structural reality where truces or tregas are brokered and then just immediately broken.
Almost overnight.
Yeah, you have asymmetrical strikes on oil infrastructure, and then that's followed by missile counterattacks, which is followed by proxy skirmishes. It's locked into this continuously deteriorating cycle.
And what's fascinating here is that because the war is structurally deteriorating and, highly unpredictable, the impact on distant nations isn't just some isolated event. It doesn't just happen and then resolve itself.
Right, it lingers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A guerra de desgaste becomes this permanent underlying condition that bystanders suddenly just have to manage. The global system has to internalize all that instability.
So it's kind of like, think of it as the difference between a sudden injury and a chronic illness. Like if you break your arm, that's an acute crisis, right? It hurts, you set the bone, you heal, and you move on.
Yeah, you get over it.
Right. But a guerra de desgaste is like being diagnosed with a chronic illness. The entire baseline of your life just shifts. You wake up every single day and you have to manage the symptoms, adjust your lifestyle, pay for ongoing treatment.
That is a perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
For Spain and Latin America, this war isn't a broken arm. It's a chronic condition they are forced to live with indefinitely. And when a bystander nation has to manage a chronic global illness like that, they experience the symptoms most acutely in their own domestic economy. Like this sacudida isn't happening in a vacuum. It forces a fundamental repricing of how their societies operate.
Which totally brings us to the economic terminology. Because the war is this chronic guerra de desgaste, the geopolitical crisis completely transforms into a deeply personal financial crisis for everyday citizens.
Yeah, thousands of miles away.
Exactly. And the media uses two interlinked terms here, right? Impacto sistémico, meaning systemic impact, and Efecto Domino, the domino effect.
Right, and the Hispanic media is very precise here. They're quick to point out that this is not a direct bilateral conflict for their nations. It is an impacto sistémico.
A systemic impact.
Yeah, because the global economy relies on a few really critical load-bearing pillars. And the Strait of Hormuz, where a massive percentage of the world's traded oil passes, that is one of the biggest pillars we have.
Right, so when you strike a load-bearing pillar.
The entire architecture of global trade shudders. You feel it everywhere.
And we definitely see that shudder in the immediate financial hit. I mean, the sources keep highlighting this phrase, subida histórica de la gasolina.
The historic fuel price surge.
Yeah. And this is invariably coupled with an escalada inflationary and inflationary escalation.
Because, I mean, energy prices dictate the baseline cost of all human activity.
Yeah.
If the fuel to run industrial tractors costs more, well, food costs more.
Right, exactly.
If the fuel to run cargo ships costs more, then imported consumer goods cost more. So the escalada inflationaria is just the mathematical result of that initial systemic shock. Suddenly, ordinary citizens across mainland Spain and Latin America find their economy of their personal finances just eroding week by week.
Okay, I understand that global markets are connected, but I do want to push back on this a little bit,
Yeah.
especially regarding Latin America.
Okay, sure.
You look at countries like Venezuela, Brazil, Mexico, I mean, they have massive domestic oil reserves. If they literally have the oil in their own backyard, why on earth should a conflict in the Middle East cause a historic gas spike in Bogota or Mexico City?
It's a really good question.
Shouldn't these specific nations be insulated from a Middle Eastern Sacudida?
I mean, logically, it seems like they should be, but this is exactly where the mechanics of global commodities come into play. Oil isn't priced locally based on, what's in the ground beneath your feet.
Oh, really?
No, it's priced globally based on speculative risk. Market benchmarks like Brent crude, they dictate the price. So when a garrison Solanati threatens a major shipping choke point, speculators don't just price in the barrels lost today, they price in the risk of severe shortages tomorrow.
So they price the panic.
Exactly, they price the panic. So even if a Latin American country produces its own oil, that oil is tied to a global market. If the global benchmark skyrockets, the local market just recalculates its value to match.
Wow.
Furthermore, a lot of these countries export raw crude, but they actually have to import refined gasoline because they lack the refining capacity at home.
Oh, man. So they're buying back their own energy at hyperinflated global prices?
Exactly. It's a tough spot to be in.
Okay, so imagine a traffic jam across the city. It doesn't trap the delivery truck heading to your local grocery store, but it traps the trucks delivering to, like, 5 other supermarkets.
Right.
Suddenly, everyone in the city is rushing to your supermarket to buy food. The store owner sees the panic, realizes the sudden scarcity, and just doubles the prices.
Yeah, supply and demand.
Right. So the traffic jam didn't hit your neighborhood directly, but the market panic recalculating the cost of stability absolutely drained your wallet.
That is exactly what happens. And that market panic hits developing economies with a compounding cruelty, honestly, because Latin American debt is often denominated in U.S. dollars.
Oh, right.
So when global energy prices spike, domestic inflation surges. Central banks respond by raising interest rates to fight that escalada inflationaria. And that makes borrowing more expensive, it stifles local business growth, and it makes servicing their national debt incredibly difficult.
So the Impacto Sistémico really is a multi-layered economic trap.
It's a complete trap.
And, the systemic impact isn't just fluctuating numbers on a trading floor somewhere. It is a very physical reality. I mean, global supply chains are physically choked by the deteriorating security situation. You have cargo vessels literally rerouting thousands of miles to avoid these conflict zones.
Going all the way around the Horn of Africa sometimes.
Right, which delays shipments, burns way more fuel, and drives up freight insurance.
And for Latin America, this means major disruptions at the Panama Canal and across all those transatlantic shipping routes. But for Spain, the geographic reality is even more pressing.
Because of where they are on the map.
Exactly. Spain sits right at the gateway between the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea. And the Mediterranean is heavily dependent on traffic coming through the Suez Canal, which is directly downstream from all this Middle Eastern instability.
So Spain is highly dependent on those maritime corridors for basic economic survival. They can't just wait for, the invisible hand of the market to sort out a physical blockade. The Efecto Domino literally moves from the gas pump to the military.
It does. According to the reporting we pulled from El País and RTVE, the Spanish government is being forced to make concrete military responses.
Right.
Specifically, they are deploying naval frigates, and the Spanish word there is fragatas. They're sending these fragatas to the Mediterranean and surrounding regions for escort missions.
It's like you don't want to get involved in a feud 3 streets over. You want absolutely nothing to do with it.
Right. Let them fight it out.
Exactly. But if that street is the only road the delivery trucks use to bring your neighborhood food, you have no choice. You have to go stand guard.
You have to.
But sending a warship into a volatile zone is incredibly expensive and highly risky. So how does a nation balance protecting its trade routes without getting dragged into the actual fighting of a Guerra de Desgaste?
Well, the thing is, the Spanish government isn't just acting as an independent merchant, protecting its olive oil and wine shipments. Spain is a member of NATO.
Ah, right. The alliance.
Yeah. Their deployment of frigatas is fundamentally tied to alliance obligations. The United States and European allies coordinate these maritime security missions, and Spain, as a major Mediterranean power, is expected to contribute assets to that collective security framework.
So the calculus isn't just we must protect our specific cargo ships. It's more like we are treaty-bound to show up, project strength, and assist our allies in maintaining the global maritime order.
Exactly. And that dual mandate, like the desperate economic need to keep shipping lanes open, combined with the immense geopolitical pressure to fulfill NATO obligations, it places enormous stress on the Spanish government.
Because sending warships isn't just a military or economic decision, right? It is a profoundly political one.
Oh, absolutely.
The moment those frigatas leave port, the ruling administration has to justify that deployment and that cost to a domestic audience that is already struggling to pay for groceries due to the escalada inflationaria.
And this is where the crisis fully permeates the domestic sphere. The Spanish-language media introduces our final critical concept here, and it's a great one.
Right.
Efecto de onda expansiva.
The shockwave effect.
It's an incredibly evocative term.
Right.
The explosion happens thousands of miles away, you watch it on the news, and then weeks later, the physical blast wave shatters your own windows.
Wow.
And when that onda expansiva hits the political landscape, it creates a dilemma diplomatico. A diplomatic dilemma.
Okay, let's look closely at how this dilemma diplomatico fractures Spain first. Because Spain's current government is this complex coalition led by the Pedro Sanchez administration. And they are walking a razor-thin tightrope here.
Very thin.
On one hand, the administration publicly opposes the broader conflict, and they really advocate for diplomatic de-escalation.
But on the other hand, they are compelled by those structural NATO obligations we talked about to put frigatas in the water. And this contradiction sparks these fierce, highly public debates between domestic political factions in Madrid. And based purely on the reporting in our sources, the ideological divide is incredibly stark.
Yeah, looking at the media, they outline the left-wing domestic factions pushing back hard against military deployment. Their platform really emphasizes prioritizing diplomatic peace efforts and strictly avoiding foreign entanglements.
Right, keep the military at home.
Exactly. From their perspective, as reported, sending warships to a volatile region is an unnecessary escalation that risks Spanish lives and drags the country into a war led by foreign powers.
Conversely, the media outlines the right-wing domestic factions arguing the exact opposite.
Right.
Their stance emphasizes that standing firm with NATO, fulfilling allied obligations, and actively projecting military strength to protect vital trade routes is really the only realistic way to ensure national security.
Right, projecting strength.
Yeah. From their perspective, showing weakness in the face of a Guerra de Desgaste only invites further economic chaos and threatens the sovereignty of Western supply chains.
It's fascinating because both factions are looking at the exact same conflict. Both are dealing with the exact same escalada inflationaria. But their internal political priorities lead them to diametrically opposed conclusions on how Spain actually must react.
Exactly.
So the Spanish media isn't just covering the Middle East anymore, they're covering this internal tug of war. The dilemma diplomatico dominates the front pages because it actively threatens the stability of their own governing coalitions.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, foreign policy almost always functions as a mirror.
A mirror.
Yeah, it reflects and amplifies the existing political anxieties within a country. When an economy is squeezed and the fear of global escalation is high, populations and politicians, they just retreat to their core ideological identities.
And we definitely see this mirror effect happening across Latin America as well, though the reflection looks a bit different. The Efecto de onda expansiva hits Latin America and turns the war into this regional geopolitical litmus test.
Oh, completely. The coverage out of France 24 Español shows a region deeply polarized. For Latin American governments, the discourse isn't just about managing fuel prices anymore.
Yeah.
It becomes a proxy debate about their fundamental stance toward the United States and the broader global power dynamic.
Right. Because the sources report that left-wing regimes in Latin America, and they specifically cite nations like Venezuela and Cuba, they are using the crisis to fiercely condemn U.S. military intervention.
Right.
Their public stance is rooted in a historical ideological opposition to U.S. hegemony. They look at the standoff in the Strait of Hormuz, the military strikes, the sanctions, and they frame the narrative entirely through the lens of anti-imperialism.
Yes.
For them, the Sacudida is a direct result of aggressive Western foreign policy.
Meanwhile, the media highlights that a right-wing or historically pro-U.S. regimes in Latin America view the situation through the lens of regional and global security.
Right, a totally different lens.
Entirely. Their primary stated concern is destabilization. They look at the U.S.-Iran war and fear that unchecked aggression by Iran, or the success of its proxy networks, could embolden disruptive asymmetrical actors much closer to home.
Oh, they were worried about the blueprint of the conflict spreading.
Precisely. Because they rely heavily on foreign direct investment, stable global markets, and predictable trade routes. So these governments tend to support, or at least quietly align with, U.S. and allied intervention.
Because of the economics.
Yeah, they view Western military action not as imperialism, but as the necessary policing required to prevent the global economic order from just collapsing.
Wow. So the onda expansiva hits everyone, but the interpretation is totally fractured. The left-wing governments point to the news as proof of dangerous U.S. interventionism, while the right-wing governments point to the exact same news as proof of the vital need for an enforced global security apparatus.
Exactly.
It forces entire nations to pick a side, and not necessarily on the tactical details of what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz, but on their broader worldview.
And, for a language learner or just anyone trying to genuinely understand global affairs, this is the crucial takeaway. When you read about a dilemma diplomatico in a Mexican newspaper or hear a Spanish news anchor discuss a sacudida, you aren't just memorizing vocabulary flashcards.
No, not at all.
You are observing the exposed fault lines of a society.
You are seeing exactly how they internalize trauma. Let's retrace the journey we've taken through these sources. We started with the Guerra de Desgaste, a grinding, structurally deteriorating war of attrition.
Right, and that distant war triggered an Efecto Domino, a domino effect resulting in an Impacto Sistémico that just squeezed the global economy.
Which hit ordinary citizens through a severe escalada inflationaria, an inflationary escalation that eroded their economia personal and drove up the cost of basic survival.
And then the physical manifestation of that disrupted system forced bystander nations like Spain to intervene, deploying fregatas to protect maritime trade and fulfill alliance obligations.
And finally, the sheer stress of that military and economic pressure sent an efecto de onda expansiva, a political shockwave, through the Spanish-speaking world. It created a paralyzing dilemma diplomatico in Madrid and polarized Latin America into ideological camps.
I mean, it really is a masterclass in modern systemic vulnerability. You strike a shipping lane in the Middle East, and you immediately scramble the political math in Bogotá and threaten the ruling coalition in Madrid. The vocabulary captures the mechanism perfectly.
It really does. By mastering these phrases, you've gained a completely new analytical lens. You aren't just reading the text of the news anymore. You are reading the subtext.
Yeah, you see what's underneath it all.
Right. You understand the systemic terror behind a phrase like subida histórica de la gasolina, and you understand the immense domestic political danger lurking inside a single word like fregata.
You understand how half the world is basically forced to process a crisis they didn't even start.
Which honestly brings us right back to where we started. We turned off the feed from Washington and Tehran to look at the shockwaves hitting Spain and Latin America. But after tracking the math of this Impacto Sistémico, how a localized blockade instantly recalculates the price of a commute in Buenos Aires,
Right.
and how a foreign standoff becomes a domestic litmus test for governments thousands of miles away. It really leaves you with a lingering question about the whole architecture of our modern world.
Yeah, because the lines between domestic and foreign policy, they have entirely dissolved.
Exactly. If a regional conflict can instantly dictate your grocery bill, dictate your central bank's interest rates, and completely fracture your local government, well, are there truly any local or distant wars left in the modern economy?
Probably not.
Right. Or is every single conflict, no matter where the missiles actually land, now a permanent, inescapable feature of our own local political landscape? Definitely something to think about the next time you see the word Sacudida in the headlines.
That concludes today's podcast. Through our analysis of international affairs and news from the Spain and Latin America world, we have learnt two Spanish words: Impacto Sistémico, systemic impact; Efecto Dominó, domino effect. We hope that by continually building on our knowledge, we can keep learning and improving, and embrace the diversity of the world and its cultures. Please do subscribe to Dr. Leo 6's multilingual learning channel.